This is the Dayton Dish Podcast, episode 11 with Darrell Davis.
We have a group of guys that go out there and compete every night at the highest level and try to win games. But now that we're looking at it, we come out every night like we did yesterday night against Bonaventure. We have a team that can beat anybody in this league.
My name is Keith Radd, and on this episode of the podcast, we chat with Darrell Davis, Dayton's leading scorer. It's been a nice year for Darrell. He had 3 years as a sharpshooter under Archie Miller, mostly a perimeter guy. This year, he is mainly the entire offense, leading the team in points per game, shooting from three, and driving to the basket. It's been a much better year for Darrell. He's a nice kid. You'll hear from him. You'll hear about his personal achievements, the difference between Anthony Grant and Archie Miller, how the St. Bonaventure win can mean more wins down the road for Dayton, and being a senior leader on this team. The music on this podcast, as always, belongs to Dayton music producer Colson Kelly. You can go to colsonkellybeats.com for more, and from that website you can link to his SoundCloud, his everything. Really great music, as we've heard throughout the first 11 episodes of this cast. So, without further ado, here's our chat with Darrell Davis. Coming into this season and to where you are now as a player in terms of your production, 20 points a game, did you think you would be as productive as you are right now?
I wouldn't say I don't know if I would have been productive as I am now. I just wanted to come in as a senior and play hard, compete at the highest level and win games for my teammates, that's all.
How do you feel after the first 3 years of you were really a sharpshooter, and now you're more of a sharpshooter and a driver and a scorer? What's changed from the time you got to Dayton to where you are now?
Me working on my game in different areas and aspects of basketball. Me watching film with previous coaches and coaches now, and seeing ways that I can attack. And from that on, it allowed me to expand my game because I see what people key into me. Whereas my first 3 years, where they knew I was a sharpshooter in the basketball, I wasn't going to the lane to create a play for myself or create a play for my teammates. I had players like Scoops and Charles that would do things like that. So I was just live as a sharpshooter, but now being at the center, I got to be more aggressive. And like I said, watching film and things like that, it helped me out way more where I can create shots for myself and work on my game.
When you say you were watching film, what was the biggest thing that you took from those film sessions?
The biggest thing I took from the film sessions was the way people closed out on me, and the way I can create a shot for myself or even create a shot for my teammates. It also helped me feel more confident in taking shots. I know it's gonna be contested sometimes. So it's not gonna be contested, but that's the shooters. You gotta be able to make shots when they're contested and not contested.
You talked about the differences in coaching staffs that you've had to deal with your time in Dayton. With Anthony Grant on the sidelines, do you feel that you have more freedom to become a better scorer with the setup now?
Yeah, I feel like I have more freedom with Anthony Grant. Anthony Grant, I thought I had freedom with Arch also, but I had a little bit of limitations because I had other players that played in front of me. And with Coach Anthony Grant, now it's like it's my time. It's my last year, so I got to make something out of nothing. And me working on my game with him over the summer and the coaching staff that we have now, it created opportunities for me to score the basketball as I am now.
Overall, what is the biggest difference between Archie and Anthony?
It's funny because Archie is more of a yelling coach, going to get on your behind and things like that. Coach Grant is more of a laid-back, understanding type of guy.
You've had success with both of them. You had your first 3 years were great with Archie, and your year now with Anthony is even better. So, usually guys like to be coached differently. Which style do you tend to lean towards? The yelling style or the more calm and relaxed style?
I mean, I would say the calm, relaxed style, but in the same token, you have to be yelled at because you got to be yelled at as a leader on the team so the other group of guys can learn from the example that the captain being yelled at. So if the captain can be yelled at, anybody on the team can be yelled at. And but the way Coach Grant is coaching the team now, is coaching me terrific. He even yells at me times in the game, tells me I did something wrong, and I appreciate him doing that because I'm needed.
Speaking with Darrell Davis here on the Dayton Dish podcast, in terms of the team, let's just talk about the victory over St. Bonaventure last night. How satisfying was that?
Oh, that victory is very satisfying for Coach Grant at 200 win. Very scared Flyers faith for all of us fans in the arena last night because I know people have different hopes and thoughts about this team and what we're going to be coming since we lost a few games early in the season. They said we were young and things like that. But I just looked at it as like every loss we had was most likely self-inflicted after I looked at the thing with the team and the staff. And I feel like we have a group of guys that go out there and compete every night at the highest level and try to win games. But now that we're looking at it, if we come out every night like we did yesterday night against Bonaventure, we have a team that can beat anybody in this league.
What about this team do you like so much?
The team, the bond that we had on off the court, I feel like it's family-oriented coaching staff. I can talk to coach anytime I want to. Everything about this is good. I don't feel like you just brought us from another mother.
Speaking with Darrell Davis on the Dayton Dish podcast, we talked about some of the things you like. What are the things that you think are holding your team back a little bit that you have to get through?
I would say I know we have tendencies in the game where we get stagnant on the offensive end, and I stand on the foul show is a big key for this season. But Josh Cunningham especially, we need him on the floor a lot, and I just feel that's the only thing that's holding us back. And everything else, I feel like it's fine. We have a group of guys that is ready to compete at the highest level.
Josh said before the St. Bonaventure game that you guys had to have a little bit more fun. Do you feel that maybe as a young team, everybody except you, of course, a young team feels a little tense and nervous to play their full, relaxed, fun game?
I feel like that in the beginning of the game, some of my younger guys, they feel kind of like tense about if they want to make that right pass and make the play or take a shot and things like that. But I tell our guys all the time, we got to take this shot if it's open, or if you feel like you can make the shot, take the shot, be confident in yourself and playing, because I was the same way until now. I'm taking a shot that I know I feel like I can make. Like I said, you got to be able to make shots on people and without people in your face.
With the St. Bonaventure game, what stood out to you guys? Because it was a full 40 minutes, and the St. Mary's game was you had them for 20 and you lost them for the second 20. So what was the biggest thing in the game against the Bonnies that led you guys to win?
Bonnies, I would say the defense, it was incredible. In the first half, I think we had a DR of .69, holding them to like 0 for 7 from the three-point line. And St. Mary's, we only had one good half, in which the second half wasn't good because they offensive rebound in the game a lot, was led to them to get open three-points and things like that.
And so from that, you've played basketball for a long time. You know that defense can show up. You know, even when the offense might have a tough night, defense can always be there. So how much confidence does that give you that you can do what you guys did against St. Bonaventure against other really big teams?
It gives us a lot of confidence. Coach Grant preached a lot about defense. There's never a night where you should have a bad defensive night, because that's something you just can't mess up on, especially if you get 100% effort. On the offensive end, it's totally different because you can have nights where you go 0 for 11 like I did against St. Mary's, but it's like we have things called like hustle stats, which doesn't show up on like the stat sheet, but like it shows up where we go back and watch film and you see how many blocks you had, how many rebounds, how many charges and things like that. So it counts for a lot on the defensive end.
Speaking with Darrell Davis here on the Dayton Dish podcast, I want to go back to you a little bit before we wind down. As a senior, do you find yourself answering questions that you asked when you were a freshman with some of these young guys?
Yeah, that's funny. I find a lot with David Crutcher. I ask him questions all the time about like how do he feel, how his body feel, how do you feel about the game, and what is his thoughts about the game and the previous game coming up. And he tells me he's just going to stay physically and mentally ready to prepare, and accept the challenge given to him.
And with you and the success that you've had, I'm sure that your family, who's been through this with you,
knew over the first 3 years when you were just sort of a three-point, threat. Now they see your full game. You're enjoying your season. How has your family reacted to the way you've played?
My mom is not a big of a sports fan, so she's happy with whatever happens in the basketball game, I would say. That's funny, but my dad, like he was telling me throughout the season, the years I've been here, your times are going to come. Be patient. God always has a plan for you, and I was like being indecisive about things, but I stuck with it. Stuck with the plan. I was blessed to get entered as a coach, and I'm blessed to expose my game in areas that I can expose them on the offensive and defensive end.
Final question for you. It's always nice for us and people on Twitter and the media to think big picture all the time, but can you think big picture at all? You guys at 7-7, do you feel that you could finish a lot stronger than you have now?
Oh, definitely. I feel like we can finish a lot stronger than we have now. If we come out with the same intensity that we had against Bonaventure in the first and second half, like I said, we can beat anybody in this league, and we can wind up winning the ATN tournament for the third straight year in a row.
Darrell Davis, the senior guard for the Dayton Flyers. Darrell, thank you so much for the time, and good luck to you, my friend.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the podcast. My name is Keith Rad. That was Darrell Davis. Dayton plays UMass this Saturday in Dayton. A chance to get above 500 overall and a chance to get above 500 in the conference. We'll have more podcasts coming as the season continues. Enjoy.